How do you determine which brush is best for styling your natural curls with so many options out there, such as the Denman Brush, the Tangle Teezer, the new Bounce Curl Brush, and even the Briogeo Vegan Boar Bristle Brush? Well, I'm gonna actually be comparing all 4 of these brushes, which are some of my favorite styling brushes. I'm gonna be putting these head to head by doing the exact same routine, but changing out the brush that I'm using. Same styling technique, same products used, so that way we can get a true comparison to the difference that these brushes make and the results that I get. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first brush I'm going to be talking about is probably the most popular brush in the curly hair community, and that is the Denman Brush. This one is the D3 7-row brush. I got this on Amazon. I've used it for quite a while, and this is a really popular brush. You've probably seen a lot of people use this one because it is made for styling naturally curly hair. So for the design of this brush, it has long plastic bristles that are pretty close together, but not as tightly compacted as some of the other brushes that I'm going to show you. I would consider this like a medium spacing between the brush bristles. And that definitely is really important because depending on the spacing of the bristles, it's going to give you a different effect. And we'll get into that as we talk through each brush design. The most unique thing about the Denman brush is you can actually remove these rows. So all you do is you just pull on it pretty hard. You got to give it a pretty good yank and pull this red part out, and then you can actually pop out the different rows, so that way you can customize the brush depending on the look that you're going for. If you want thicker curl clumps or if you want them to be more separated, that's really going to adjust the tension. This one is also unique in that it has a rubber backing, so the base of the brush has this like rubbery feeling material that actually creates more tension. So that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you're going for. The more tension in your brush, the more curling that you're going to get from your brush, or the more clumping and defining that you're going to get. But then in turn, that can mean more snags or more breakage. So the only downside for me of the Denman brush would be that I do get some snags sometimes with this. This probably can cause some breakage if you're overusing it, or if you had very fine, fragile hair, then you would want to be very gentle with this because that rubber backing could cause too much tension. It's also nice that it does have this tapered handle because you can use this for brush coiling techniques, which is where you wrap the hair around the base of the handle of the brush and use it to actually curl your hair. I would say that the Denman brush provides medium tension on the hair, so it's not as much tension as a more densely packed brush like some of the ones I'm going to show you here, and it's not as light tension as say a wet brush or just something that's meant just for detangling the hair and not necessarily a styling brush. But it does depend on how you use it. You can definitely apply more tension by pressing your hand against the brush and doing more of a curling action with it. It also does have a rounded edge to it. This one probably has the most rounded edge compared to the other brushes that I'm going to show you, and that's going to help the hair curl around it. Now, I think the hair curls around all of these brushes that I have very well, but this one is the most round in shape because it is designed for that curling technique. I would only use this brush for styling. I don't recommend it for detangling. I'm not even sure if they market it for detangling. I need to check the website to see if it is meant for that. You could maybe use this for detangling, but I find that I get too many snags with it and it's just not great for detangling or really for distributing products. So I would say it's mainly just used for styling. So now let's take a look at my results after styling and diffusing and using the Denman brush. So I can definitely tell a difference mainly between the Denman brush and the rest of my results, and I'll show you at the end all of them compared side by side. But with the Denman brush, I have a lot more volume and separation. I don't know if I was doing more separating when I was styling. I didn't feel like I was doing that though. I was really trying to get a good read on the brush. But overall, I have a lot more volume and just more separation and almost like skinnier curl clumps. So like smaller little curl clumps that are still defined, but I definitely have more fullness to my hair. I was able to kind of brush coil the front sections, like the front pieces, which is what I typically do using the handle of the brush, and those definitely are very coiled and look great. Overall, I think my results look really nice, and there's definitely a difference in these results compared to the others that you'll see towards the end. So the next brush that I have to discuss is the Tangle Teezer Naturally Curly Ultimate Detangler, I think is what it's called. There's multiple variations of this brush. Their regular Tangle Teezer is pretty much the same. I think the brush rows are just a little bit different on the naturally curly version. Maybe there is just more levels of the bristles. The design of this brush is completely plastic, and it's a very smooth plastic, which is nice because this one I would say is the safest to use on your curls in terms of preventing breakage and snags because it's so slippery, but yet it still does provide some tension because of the design of the bristles. So there is a combination of short and long bristles here, so you can see they're a little bit more densely packed. Because the bristles are more densely packed, that's what's going to create more tension, but they're also very slippery and smooth and plastic, so it's not going to cause too much tension or too much friction. So this, I feel like, provides the best combination, and you can really use it multiple ways. I would say that this probably provides a medium amount of tension, just like the Denman brush. I can get good tension if I really do press my hand against it, or I can get less tension if I just sort of run my brush through my hair. This one is also unique compared to the others in that it can be used multiple different ways. It's actually designed to be used for detangling, so it is great for that. However, I don't usually recommend detangling your hair with a brush because I really try and prevent breakage, and I can tell if I'm causing breakage more when I'm using my bare hands to detangle. So I usually always detangle with my fingers, so that way I can just kind of gradually separate knots. But if you do like using a brush to detangle, this is the one that I would recommend. Sometimes I will use this on refresh days to kind of detangle some knotted curls and then redefine them. And it can also be used to distribute products. So I always usually will use this after I apply my heat protectant, my curl cream, and then even when I use my gel, just to evenly distribute the product all throughout my hair. So I love that it's multi-purpose. So it's great for traveling. I usually will take this one just so I don't have to take multiple brushes. And I usually reach for this one probably the most because it is so multi-purpose. So you can use this brush to just comb an entire section, which you will usually see me do that on the bottom section, or you can use it to create more of those coils and those clumps. I usually will do this throughout the top section of my head. And you can also use it to brush coil. Just like I mentioned with the Denman brush, it has a rounded handle on it, so you can wrap the hair around the handle, and it works great for that. A lot of times I do this on problem areas for me, like around my hairline and around areas where I have grays, because that really helps to kind of tuck those grays in, and then I have nice curls on the front section. I find that I get the least amount of breakage and shedding when I use this brush because it is really the best of both worlds, where you can get the clumping and the defining that you want, but then it's also not going to put too much tension and harm your hair, especially if you're someone that likes to brush style a lot, like I usually do every wash day. So that's why I tend to find that I do usually reach for this one the most, probably because I'm usually really trying to prevent breakage. So in terms of my results with the Tangle Teezer brush, I find that I get really great shrinkage. I would probably consider this one like medium shrinkage compared to the other brushes. It's definitely the right amount of tension. It's like a medium amount of tension, not super firm, so it's not gonna give you like super tight ribbon curls. I mean, depending on how you use it. I also have a good amount of volume still, and I usually will go in and separate my curl clumps if they're too thick, and I just usually use my fingers or a comb separately when I am using the Tangle Teezer brush. So the next brush that I have to talk about is the Briogeo Vegan Boar Bristle brush. This brush is designed similarly to a boar bristle brush in the shape and also the type of bristles, how they're so densely compacted, but it's made out of a synthetic plastic material. So you'll see there are bristles that are your traditional type of brush bristles, where there is a longer plastic bristle with a little ball point, which helps it to be a little bit more gentle on the scalp and doesn't hurt your scalp by having those little balls at the end. And then there's also these shorter bristles, which are made out of that synthetic like vegan boar material, where it's not made out of natural boar material. And I find that to be a lot softer. I've tried regular boar bristle brushes and they are just way too harsh on the hair. They cause too much breakage and tension, and they hurt on the scalp. And I find that the synthetic material of the dense bristles don't cause quite as much breakage and snags as regular boar bristles do. The base of this brush has that cushion backing, so it's kind of like bouncy when you press it. It's supposed to just provide some more flexibility in there, like if you were to use this to detangle. And I think this provides a high amount of tension because the bristles are so densely packed. You do get quite a bit of tension, so that's going to give you more of those ribbon curls, more definition, and a lot more shrinkage, and you get those chunkier, larger curl clumps. In terms of the uses, I find that this really only works good for styling. You definitely can use it to detangle. They do say on the site that you can detangle with it, but again, I don't recommend doing that, especially if you're someone who struggles with breakage or if you have very fine hair. This is just going to be too much tension. I mean, the bristles are flexible at least, but I still think that's too much tension to detangle with this. I think it could cause breakage, so I recommend just using it for styling. So you can definitely tell a difference, and you'll see in the demo when I'm using this that it really does create thicker curl clumps. You can definitely get that very like flattened out look to your curls. Like you get it's just a different shape of the curl clump, if that makes sense, depending on the size of hair that you pick up. But I usually try and go for a more separated look, so I would even separate those after, or I would just make sure that I pick up smaller sections so that way my hair doesn't end up too clumped. You can wrap the hair around the handle of this brush. It is small, so I don't know how much you could really get a long brush curl out of it. You can still use it, but it is a little bit shorter compared to the others, and it's not quite as tapered. So it's a little bit harder to do brush coiling with this, plus it's more of a flat shape, but you definitely could. One other thing I wanted to mention about having a brush that has very dense bristles is you get more scalp covering. This is the brush that I will usually use if I do really want to cover any cowlicks or where the hair is kind of splitting, or if I want to hide a part and really get more of that scalp coverage to where you can't see my scalp through the curl clumps. This is what I'll use. Because the brushes are so dense, you're able to get that sort of like flattened out look where the hair completely covers and it's not creating those spaces. Whereas if you were to use something that has wider space bristles, it's creating those spaces and those gaps to where that's then exposing the scalp. So for somebody with very low density hair, you can use this for that. So in terms of my results for this brush, you can definitely tell that I have more curl clumps, a lot more shrinkage, but that in turn leads to more volume for me. So I find that I have the least amount of volume in this routine because my hair is so clumped together, and I have low density thin hair, so I can't over clump my hair. So that's usually when I would have to go in with the comb after using a very high tension brush like this to separate my curls. The last brush I have to share with you is the new one from Bounce Curl. This is the Curl Define Styling Brush. This is definitely the most unique design of a brush. So to start, it has dense bristles, just like the Briogeo one that we just talked about, where it has multiple layers of bristles. You have your shorter bristles, which are made out of that same type of synthetic plastic vegan boar material, where they're shorter, they're very densely packed. In each little space, you've got a bunch of those little bristles. And then you also have the longer bristles that again have those balls at the end that are not going to snag on your scalp, and it's not going to hurt your scalp. It's very comfortable when it touches your scalp because it has those little ends on the bristles. The spacing of these bristles looks very similar to the Briogeo brush, maybe slightly wider spacing between the bristles, but overall, it still provides high tension. And the most unique part of this design are the grooves on the edges of this brush. You have these little grooves that are almost like a wide tooth comb all the way around the brush, even on the tip of the brush. This is really going to separate the curl clumps. It almost like groups the strands into their individual curl clumps that are more evenly spaced, and then glide down your hair, so it's both separating and defining at the same time, so you don't have to go in with a wide tooth comb afterwards to separate your curl clumps. Also, if you're somebody that struggles with even getting curl clumps to begin with, then this is going to help create them because it's going to group those hairs into the individual curl clumps. Also, with the design of this brush, it's nice because it does have this tapered handle that is very smooth, so the material is not going to snag on your hair. It's not like going to cause too much tension when using the handle. You can use this for brush coiling. This is actually my favorite design for brush coiling because it is tapered, it has a rounded edge to it, it's long enough to where you can really use it for that brush coiling technique. And the pointed tip sort of acts like a rat tail comb for sectioning. So I love having that when I'm brush styling my hair because I like to use that to pick up really clean sections, especially I will do that around this top section of my hair where I really want to define it further. That just makes it so much easier to pick up the same size sections each time versus using my finger. When comparing the tension or the breakage potential, I guess, between the Briogeo and the bounce curl brush, I would say that the bounce curl one is probably a little bit safer. Like I get less hair in the brush compared to the Briogeo one. In terms of the uses, I typically will only use this for styling. I have used it to distribute product. Feels a little bit weird using a brush with high tension to distribute product, but it definitely works for that. I usually don't worry about holding on to another brush to distribute products, so I will just go in with this. But I would say it's definitely designed for styling. I would not use this to detangle, and I'm pretty sure they don't mention that either. It's not meant for detangling. They have other brushes for detangling from bounce curl. I'd say the main downside of the design of this brush is if you are somebody that doesn't necessarily have this size curl clump, like if you naturally have smaller curl clumps, like smaller curl families that are much more skinny, then you're kind of forcing it into the size of these grooves and the size of these clumps, so you might not get the same effect. You can definitely still use it, but you might notice your curl clumps kind of splitting after you're done. That definitely happens to me in certain areas, especially where my hair might sort of change direction, or if I pick up too large of a curl clump, there's gonna be hairs that go in lots of different directions. They might be different widths of curl families, so it might not necessarily work the way that you hope for every area of your hair. Now, if you're someone with an even curl pattern and you have this size curl clump, then it's definitely gonna work great. I still use it though, and I just let the curl clumps kind of naturally separate, or I'll kind of like finger coil to fix those afterwards. I've heard though that they are working on designing this brush like in different variations for different hair types. So maybe that's one thing they're working on, is different size grooves for different size curl clumps, so we'll have to see. So in looking at my results from this brush, I would say the thing that stands out to me the most is I have the most even clumping, and maybe that's because of the grooves on the side of this brush. I can definitely tell that the curl clumps look like they are similar sizes versus sometimes I experience like some huge curl clumps that I have to separate and then some that are more skinny. It definitely looks a little bit more even. And I also have a ton of shrinkage when I use this brush. Like my curls really spring up, and I think that has a lot to do with the tension that it provides, which I also do get from the Briogeo brush. I do get high shrinkage, but this one I can just tell a lot more shrinkage, probably also because of the grooves on the side of the brush. I get a ton of shrinkage with this, and my hair looks a lot shorter too. I'd say the other noticeable thing is I don't have quite as much volume when using this brush because it is clumping the hair so much. And as I mentioned before, the more curl clumps and the chunkier curl clumps, the thinner your hair might look because it's not creating as much separation and volume. And if you pick up smaller sections and not such a large section, you definitely could get more volume with this, but I would say that is one downside, at least when I'm brush styling. The more brush curling that I do, the less volume that I have. So now to summarize all of this and kind of compare all four of these brushes. For the Briogeo and the bounce curl brush, these are probably the most similar in their design because they have those two lengths of bristles that are very similar with that vegan boar material. And they both also provide high tension and give a lot of shrinkage and curl clumps. When it comes to comparing the tension between all four, the Tangle Teezer and the Denman Brush are going to give you that medium tension, and then the Briogeo and the Bounce Curl are going to give you the high tension on your hair, which is giving more of those clumps. In terms of the uses, all of these I would really only recommend for styling, with the exception of the Tangle Teezer, which can be used different ways with both detangling and distributing product. And then to compare all four of my results side by side, here's how everything looks next to each other. Pause, let me know which differences that you spot. Definitely tell me in the comments. But for me, I definitely noticed, as I mentioned, the most volume and the skinniest curl clumps with the most separation in the Denman Brush results. I would say my results in terms of shrinkage and clumping and all is about middle of the road with the Tangle Teezer brush. So it's a good middle ground brush to where I can still get separation, it's not too much tension, and I can still get curl clumps if I want, and I can still brush coil with it. So that one's like middle of the road for me. And then with the Bounce Curl and the Briogeo brush, they definitely look very similar. I definitely have those chunky curl clumps, a lot of definition, a lot of shrinkage. But with the bounce curl brush, you can definitely tell a difference with that edge design that has those grooves that are creating more even separated curl clumps. So I get a little bit more volume when using the bounce curl brush compared to the Briogeo brush. To be honest, there's not a ton of difference between my results because it's really all in the technique that you're using. And the products do come into play as well, but I can pretty much get the same results with any brush. Like if I'm getting thicker curl clumps from a vegan Boar bristle brush, then I'll just separate them with my hands afterwards. And then if I have a brush that's not giving much tension, then I'll just apply more pressure with my hands. So I can get pretty much the same results. So if you're not really seeing any differences in my hair, it's probably because of just the way that I style. So if you're wondering which brush that I choose and which one that I recommend the most and that I've been using the most, and I would probably say I'm torn between the Tangle Teezer and the bounce curl brush. I use the Tangle Teezer a lot because, as I mentioned, I am really concerned about breakage and I don't want too much tension, and I like that it's multi-purpose, so you'll see me use this one a ton. But I have really been enjoying my results with the bounce curl brush because I get such defined curl clumps and a lot of shrinkage, which is the look that I love. And it's been a while since I used the Denman brush, but I was really surprised by my results, and I definitely like my results with this. I like the volume that I get from it. So I put all of this together for you on a comparison chart on the blog post that goes with this video. I'm gonna have that linked in the description box below. Just click that see more button below the video title and that will expand the description box and you'll see the link there. I'll also put it in the pinned comments. And if you're needing more help with brush styling and if you just can't seem to get it, then I recommend checking out the video that I will have linked right here on the screen. It's called Brush Styling Troubleshooting, and I walk you through all of the common problems that you all have mentioned that you experience with brush styling, such as your curls falling straight and it just not working, and how to hold the brush, and all of that is in that video. So I hope you find that helpful, and I will talk to you over there. Bye everyone.